Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. We both sort of agree. I think we both agree Harbaugh's off to the NFL. I think you've convinced me Washington could have a slight edge. You know, in that division, it's interesting too. So in that division, I mean, you got to think about everything. Although Harbaugh wouldn't probably spend much time on this, Mike McCarthy, Nick Sirianni, right? Harbaugh.
Dayball's defensive coordinator
I saw
just
Wink
quit.
Martindale.
I mean, the Giants have a lot of issues. I was told, and I said this on the pod a month and a half ago, the coaches didn't like him. And I thought Dayball was really good last year, but they have had a lot of strife internally. And there was a lot of talk, everything's fine, everything's fine. Well, one of the best assets on the coaching staff was like, I'm out. Quit, which is not normal. I mean, that's right. A huge red flag. He wasn't fired. He said, I want out. You know, so the Dayball situation, let's face it, offensively, they haven't really been explosive. They're tied to Daniel Jones, and now they lose their defensive coordinator. They've been excellent on defense. I mean, last year they made the playoffs because it's not like they were scoring a lot of points. So I would say the Giants are very, very in flux. The Eagles, we've never seen a 10-1 team leak oil like them. And the Cowboys, you can feel the pressure building, right? Every playoff game, if something gets weird, Jerry's getting older, is liable to do something crazy. Even he didn't really give him the ringing endorsement going into the playoffs, right? We'll see what happens. So I think Washington, I still think the Raiders are, the history of football means something to Jim. You get a blank slate. Like you said, the Chargers isn't necessarily a blank slate. You get Herbert, but there is a lot of other stuff going on.
Issues. You've got to move off some people there. Washington's got the most cap space. There's a romance about the Raiders. I just seen so many coaches fail there. After a while, it feels like there's a systemic problem beyond just like the helmet and the logo. Like Mark Davis is one of the poorest owners, and it's they've made some bad decisions on personnel, head coaching, GM. So I think I'd pass on that.
Yeah, I would too. I just think Jim's crazy enough to be connected there, which I believe. And I think it's fair to say it wouldn't shock me if he doesn't even pick up David Tepper's call at this point in time. That organization's got a lot of issues, a lot of questions, and it doesn't really feel like Bryce Young would be. I mean, Jim would have him by about 5 inches and 45 pounds. So it doesn't seem like he'd be that interested in that quarterback.
By the way, let's spend 5 minutes on this. So the playoff bracket is out. We don't need to go game by game, but I do think it's interesting. The game that really jumps out to me is the Rams against the Lions. Sam Laporta is hurt, the remarkable rookie tight end for Detroit. I went through coaching is so valuable. I went through the Rams and the Lions today on the show, and I wrote down things that matter. Head coach, Rams advantage. Quarterback, Rams advantage. I like their wide receivers, Puka and Cooper, wide receiver advantage. If Laporta's out, tight end advantage. O-line advantage, especially left tackle. It's Detroit, but PFF has the Rams as like the 10th best offensive line, and they're pretty good. Left guard over to the right tackle. Jackson's an undrafted left tackle. He's serviceable. He's not great. They're going to draft a tackle very early, I've been told, in the draft. My gut feeling on that is the Lions should win the game, but you talked about the injury report. Dan Campbell said today there's an outside shot Laporta plays. I know tight ends don't drive lines in Vegas, but I felt like without Laporta, I mean, here's the thing. The Rams' weakness, they leak on the back end of the secondary. Well, nobody leaks like the Lions. So I don't know. I found myself today, the more I looked at that injury report, I'm like, God, could it be a bit of a coaching mismatch?
I also think these playoff games, the way it's one and done, all of a sudden the Rams, you're up 17-10. That place gets tight. Dan Campbell gets tight. He gets a little over aggressive sometimes. You can see that thing unraveling. The other thing, what gets with Jared Goff? Pressure. Now he's a much better quarterback in a dome, in a controlled environment, no weather. But if they can hit him, and what are the Rams? Aaron Donald's going to be bringing it. The young pass rusher they drafted in the mid rounds from Wake Forest is pretty good. So they can get Raheem Morris is, a guy that's going to be interviewing all over the league. He's a really good defensive coordinator. That Laporta injury, he's not Rob Gronkowski, where he can play at 70%, like as an inline blocker. He's an athletic, he's a Kelsey
Right.
type. So that is a devastating injury for them. Because to me, if they were fully healthy, you go, listen, the Rams probably top to bottom have a little, or excuse me, the Lions
Yeah.
have more talent. This guy is an
Yeah.
elite player. I mean, he is a premium tight end. That's a devastating injury. So I got to go with McVay and the Rams, which is sad because the Lions have had a remarkable season. It's only the second time in 90 years, Colin, they've won 12
Well,
games. I mean, Niners won 12 games like 5 times in the last
yeah.
decade. They've won it twice in
Yeah,
90
and
years.
I do think, to your point, McVay, the Packers in Houston are playing with house money because they got in. But this was a rebuild year for McVay. So they're going to come in with a ton of energy. You know what's interesting? If you go look at the Rams season, the most impressive moment to me, Baltimore's off a bye, early start East Coast. They go out there and outplay them. Their leaky special teams lose the game. I watched Baltimore crush the Niners, crush Miami, crush Seattle, crush Detroit. And then I watch the Rams go out there and line up with them physically. And it's like, okay, that's not an illusion. That loss to Baltimore. I remember after that game, I'm thinking, oh, this is all real. This is absolutely real. And then, a couple of weeks later, Baltimore hammers the Niners. It happens occasionally where you'll watch a playoff run and you'll go back and go, oh, God, yeah, of course. And I look at that Rams loss to Baltimore and I think, just look who Baltimore has manhandled in the last 2 months.
Well, the Rams have a quarterback that when he's on can go toe to toe with Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar, right? How many, the 49ers can't say that, right? He's not that talented. And Matt Stafford in that game, the rain was pumping and it was pouring on, and he was elite. The other thing is their wide receivers are really physical. A lot like 49ers. They're willing to go over the middle, take hits, they break tackles, and it was on full display. Puka is truly one of the better rookie stories in recent memory. He's an elite player. So if they beat, the Lions, then they would play the 49ers, assuming the Packers lose. Now, I would pick the 49ers going into that game, but the Rams are going to feel comfortable, a team that they've seen a lot, that they've beat before in a massive game. There'd be a lot of pressure. The Niners would be favored, but they would have a ton of momentum going into that game because they've had to keep playing, right? Hell, they rolled out Wentz, who they resurrected from the dead. So they have. It's cool to see that Sean, turned down that money. He belongs in coaching. Clearly, he's reinvigorated now, saying, I'm coming back for 24. Kind of feels like he's on a year-to-year basis, but he's got to feel pretty good about his squad headed in the playoffs. And let's face it, if they just win a playoff game on the road, what a remarkable season from Sean McVay. Because we all define guys over their championship years, but really you build a resume. Like Andy Reid built a resume for 15 years, every year going to the playoffs, winning games, when guys were hurt, when he had to go with a backup quarterback. What Sean McVay's done this year with random young guys and some of his old core guys is one of the better stories of the year.
And I think, that's the thing. As again, Michigan thumps Washington, and I look at Harbaugh, and Jed Fish was on my show today, the Arizona coach, and he said, Jim's the most competitive coach I've ever worked with. I think John Harbaugh, he wants to face McVay. He wants to face Andy Reid. He may not want to face his brother, but he's proven. Ryan Day is considered an elite college coach, and Jim's got his way with him, right? Kalen DeBoer is considered the best young coach in college football. Jim completely stifled their game plan with an NFL receiver and three NFL quarterback, three NFL receivers. I think Jim looks around college football and thinks, okay, I beat Saban this year. I own Ryan Day, Kalen DeBoer, whatever. He's a competitive guy, John. I think he wants to go after McVay. He proved he can beat Pete Carroll. He wants to go after Andy Reid, McVay. And if you're competitive, I think it's the next logical step. He's proved, God, and just what a fitting way. Saban, check. the rising star, Kalen DeBoer, check. Ryan Day, check. Like, it's just perfect.
And let's face it, in the Big Ten, even with these teams coming in, half his games, he's the heavy favorite in them. And it's just not the same. I mean, he's up 25-0 to half over the majority of the Big Ten opponents. In the NFL, I don't care who you're playing. You could play a random 5-win team on a given. You play the Arizona Cardinals this year down the stretch. You got a tough game. So the level of competition is clearly so much higher in the NFL. And the coaching from an intellectual level, it's less about the motivation and more out thinking you, more out scheming you, more putting players, making personnel moves. And let's face it, Jim thrived at that with the 49ers. I mean, really did. His disastrous year was 8-8. People are like, oh, he got run out of town. It wasn't that bad. How many coaches this year would have died to go 8-8? So Jim's ceiling, or excuse me, his floor is just so high. And I'm telling you, his ability to build a coaching staff, because he knows, like, he's not Mr. Scheme guy, like his brother. And what do they hang their hat on? Having the best and the brightest. And they do a good job. We talked about this with Belichick being so insulated with only the guys he's known from when they were 22. They will take young guys who maybe are 30 or 30 that have been somewhere else and then mold them. He did it with Jed Fish. He's done it with Sharon Moore. He's doing it now with Mentor. Harbaugh's the same way. And they develop coaches really, really well. Think how many guys get jobs. Like, this is the difference between, like I've always said about Andy Reid and Belichick. All his assistants go on and have some semblance of a success. A lot of them have a lot of success. And it's because he's open-minded to bringing guys on. Same thing with the Harbaugh brothers. They're willing to talk and meet with anyone, not just because, well, you didn't work in this system. Well, are you a good coach? Do you have qualities that I like? And I think Jim, I would look for his coaching staff. Like, if you told me next year, whatever job he has, that team's obviously had a bad year previously, they're immediately competitive, I'd bet on it. I'd hammer the over of whoever he takes. I'll tell you that much.
So the parents issue, close to John Washington,
and they're clearly getting older.
Absolutely getting older. Right? Doesn't have to face his brother. And if you look at the NFC right now, there's not a lot of great young quarterbacks. I mean, Jim looks out there and sees, Josh Allen and Mahomes and Burrow and Lamar. You look over the NFC. I mean, Stafford's great, but he's got probably 2 great years left after this one.
35 years old.
It's a lot of, it could be really, I mean, if he gets one of the 2, he gets Drake May, somebody else in the NFC gets Caleb Williams. For all we know, for the next 5 years, those are the 2 best young quarterbacks in the NFC. Next year, this year's draft, it's going to be a great class. In 2024, the following year's not supposed to be as good. It's a bit of a dip year. So, I'm just, congrats to Michigan.
Well, who would you like more if I told you that Drake May goes to Harbaugh in Washington and Caleb goes with Eberflus and Getsy in Chicago? Who do you think's better right away? I'd probably bet on Drake May having more success.
Certainly in year one.
Because of the coach.
Yeah. I think, in year one, it would be Drake May. And I don't think it could be underscored is that, Sam Howell lets you're going to be no pressure year one, right? You're going to get like an 8-year.
Doesn't make any money.
Doesn't matter. But it also allows you to go into camp with a pro. And again, Sam Howell with Ron Rivera is not Sam Howell with Jim Harbaugh. He's going to be a better version, the best version of himself. And, Jim, I could see him playing him till mid-November around Thanksgiving and say, okay, we're not going to win the Super Bowl here. All right, kid, we've shored up the O-line. You got some protection. Washington's got receivers, a couple backs I like. There's a lot about Washington. I watched Washington a couple times earlier this year. I think if they beat Denver, they played with Philadelphia, and I'm like, they just need a better quarterback and a better coach. Like I was talking on a Seattle radio station this morning. I said, if you gave Pete Carroll right now, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen with that roster, you're going to the Super Bowl. It's like you get the quarterback right. It's amazing how it just erases your flaws. I mean, I still contend after Stephon Diggs, Buffalo's offense is not that talented. You watch it with Josh.
No, not
you watch
at all.
It with Josh. You're like, what a big play offense this is.
Totally. I'm just glad, Jim. I remember as a kid, I grew up around a lot of Joe Montana lifers, and they always kind of, I felt had it out for Steve, and you could feel it when they finally got the monkey off his back and Gary Plummer and he won that Super Bowl because he was a championship level player. And it just took him a little longer. To me, Jim Harbaugh's been a championship level coach. It just didn't happen at 48 years old, but happened at 60. And I'm just glad people don't talk to him about him as a guy. Andy Reid was that way for a long time. It's like, do you watch this guy coach? I mean, he's better than 98% of coaches ever. It's like he's gonna get over the hump. And now Jim has a chance if he goes to the pros to, join a small company of guys that have won on both levels, right? That's a pretty special group to be sitting at the table.
John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, he's got a podcast, 3 and Out, so valuable to our podcast company, The Volume, which is just smoking. Shannon Sharp, John, Jason Timp, Draymond Green. We've got just 520's a new one. Daniel Cormier, the Fantasy Pros, love where we're at. Just keep listening.
When are you going to have Cat Williams on your podcast?
That thing is. I had people come up to me that I didn't even. I mean, I got people that went to the Volume in the last week that I don't even think they knew what the Volume was like a week ago. It's just crazy.